have you now.
You're fulfilling your destiny.
Show me again the power of the darkness.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll. D20radio.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Luke Skywalkers, Darth Vaders, to the Knights of Ren episode 110. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We've got Jay and Rick. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey.
This week, we are going to be celebrating Destiny launching on December 1st, and it is so exciting because we have come from Gen Con, we have done Worlds, we have seen the preview events, and now we are finally going to be able to get our hands on product, make our decks, go out and test them with other friends at our local game stores. And this week, we just want to talk about a lot of different cards in the color pie that we're really excited about. So to get started, let's go with Jay's favorite color, yellow. So I'm assuming you want to start villain or hero, bro?
Oh, switching the order on me. All right, we'll start with a yellow villain. A subtle but neat card. If we're going this way, I really like Armed to the Teeth. I think this card is pretty easy to get off. There's a lot of cheap upgrades that you can slot into your villain lists that are pretty popular right now, like On the Hunt and Hunter Down. As your character's about to fall, or if you plan on swapping some stuff out. And also, you don't always have to do this for the full 3 damage, but being able to sneak in some unexpected damage and kill off a character. I've gotten it off a few times, throwing things off of Jabba as he's gotten beaten up, or your battered Tusken Raider. And I think this card... yeah, it does a lot. Like it's 0 and it's damage. It's really hard to pass up. It's tricky because when I first saw the card, I thought it was any character, but it's only yellow, so you have to be a little more careful in a split color deck. But in those Django Jabba lists, definitely consider at least one Arm to the Teeth. I have multiple times found it both like relevant and punchy. Especially, it's also good if you've spent all your dice and then you just throw your upgrades at them. You know, when you don't have the dice in play anyway, depending on how the game's going, and again, where are the damages, can you kill a guy, so forth. So definitely consider that card. 3 damage for 0 potentially. It's good in my book.
For those of you who don't know, Armed to the Teeth says discard any number of discard any number of upgrades from one of your yellow characters, then deal damage to a character equal to the number of upgrades you just discarded.
Yeah, and you've got that off on me a couple times, Jay, and for whatever reason, I know you play it, but I never see it coming. It's like, if you're loading up your character, especially, a cheap like Tusken Raider, like you said, people are going to naturally go after the characters with the most upgrades, I guess. So when they're about to die and you have no way of stopping it, getting an extra 3 damage off on somebody out of nowhere is pretty good deal.
This card seems, the peak damage you can get is 3 damage for 0 resources. But my question for you, since I'm not actually running this in any of my decks, at what point do you legitimately play it? So, if you're sitting on a character, like, do you play it like when they're about to die? Do you play it going for a kill? Like how do you use this effectively?
The easy one is clearly Jabba or Django's dead on board, and free damage is free damage. It's hard to... You're going to lose the upgrades anyway. Most yellow upgrades don't have redeploy, aside from Gaffy Stick. Yeah, again, you either use it when you're dying, or if they're hovering at a little bit of health, even if you have damage on the table, it's kind of neat to just have this sort of the cool thing about yellow is you often have a lot of backups strategies, again, Armed to the Teeth or Dirty Fighting or Ace in the Hole. All these cards let you sort of use your dice or upgrades or cards in ways that aren't natural and are hard to predict. When your opponent's just trying to evaluate what you can do by die sides, you can do something different. And again, obviously this isn't a card to do just to deal damage and just waste all your upgrades, but another timing for it that's good is if you have, again, Hunter down and you're staring at a bunch of melee damage, you can throw the Hunter down at them before you lose it anyway. Just there's a lot of niche cases, but it's a very versatile card, and I've enjoyed it. And found a lot of timings to play it.
And even just getting the last point on a character, the round's about over, the character's going to make it to the next round. Just being able to just discard something that you don't want on your character to deal that last point or two seems pretty good.
Okay, I dig it. I'm interested in putting this card to good use then.
Again, though, remember, it's harder to play in a split deck because the moment your yellow character dies, it's a dead card.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, card that I'm interested in trying out. I'm just going through the cards list last night and looking at Lying in Wait. It doesn't seem great, but it's a villain, yellow common event, costs 1. Force an opponent to discard cards from their hand until they hold the same amount of cards as you do. Like, I was in the middle of building a mono blue deck, which we'll talk a lot about later, but it was running cards that deal a lot of random discard in it, but it wasn't a discard deck. And I just started thinking, maybe if I put this blue shell with Jabba, what else can I get out of it? And then realizing that you're discarding a lot of your own cards, and then just play Lying in Wait, as another way to get them to discard cards if you don't have any of the dice rolls or anything like that. Say if you have, one card left in your hand, which is Lying in Wait, you play this and they got to discard up to 5 with this, right?
Right. So I've been testing a Qui-Gon Jinn and Finn tanky stall deck, and I noticed the biggest problem I had was I would always get down to the opponent would have no cards in their deck, and then they'd have like 3 or 4 cards in their hand, and I had no way of getting rid of them. And it was really frustrating. So I was starting to think about how can I mitigate cards out of someone's hand. And so I also play Dooku Phasma Trooper right now. And this card came to mind because of the problem I was having with Qui-Gon as a solution within a villain deck. So with Dooku, you're constantly discarding cards to keep him alive, which isn't a bad thing, but there's got to be a way to use that to your advantage. So a lot of people think about Boundless Ambition, you draw cards up to your hand size, but then I saw this and I thought about the inverse property of, well, how about if I've discarded, 4 cards, this is the last card in my hand, and now I can make my opponent have 0 cards in their hand, just like me. And if I'm playing Dooku, you can also get his discard effect off. And so you could potentially mill out your opponent with a villain kind of stall tanky deck, utilizing this as one of the core pieces. So I'm interested in testing, seeing how it works, but it's definitely a very interesting card in terms of it's very deceptive. Like you don't look at this and immediately realize the combo potential, but once you started to kind of figure out how you want to gravitate towards a certain deck strategy, this fits really well into like that stally mill hand destruction kind of theme, which I'm very excited to play with.
Do remember, you can't play that in Dooku Phasma Trooper because it's a yellow card. We're talking yellow right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, in my experience, I've started to like the card more, but the thing that frustrates me is a vast majority of discard in this game is random, and which does hurt this card a fair amount if you're trying to use it as a sort of way of punishing your opponent back for making you discard. But I really liked the Dooku example. You can Dooku Jabba and just burn down and then sort of take them with you, so to speak. So I think the card is neat, and I'm a little curious with these discard mill decks if there's a way of using it to hopefully snake out some of those patiences. Yeah, it's kind of hard to use.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same shell that I was looking at when I started thinking about it as Dooku and Jabba. It's kind of funny we both went, or all three of us went there with without even talking about this beforehand.
Actually, I was thinking about Dooku and Balatik, believe it or not.
Balatik.
Fair enough.
I
leave you though.
Well, I'm not going to say it's a great matchup, but I'm trying to figure a way to fit him in with like a powerhouse. So I'm trying, maybe double Balatik and, double Dooku. I'm not actually sure if that's a legitimate deck, but we'll see. It could work. I think it'd be interesting.
Yeah, Balatik at 8 or 11, Dooku at 11 or 15.
You can do Dooku Balatik Stormtrooper.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. Okay.
And then you got Rainbow John.
I thought about Elite Dooku, Elite Balatik.
Sure.
Just because, 2 dice for 11 points is no joke. And people are obviously going to focus Dooku because no one cares about Balatik. And I think that's one of his strengths is, he's kind of like Rey. People initially were like, Rey sucks. And we've kind of figured out, like, with the right pieces in the deck, she's very threatening. So I feel the same way that Balatik can have the right equipment in a deck, and he can be very punchy, and people won't see it coming until, they've tried to focus out Dooku, and then you realize, well, now Balatik's loaded up. We have a problem here. And like I said, I'll have to test it, but I want to make him work. I'm very excited for his card.
Yeah, I think Jabba's just the better pair there because with Dooku and Jabba, you have 4 dice with 2 discard on it.
Ooh, yeah, I totally agree. I think Jabba and Dooku is inherently a better shell for this strategy.
How did we get down this rabbit hole?
Well, theoretically, Balatik could be Suji's choice for the yellow card at the moment. We could have that.
I'm funning with Balatik. I think he's a fun guy.
I like Bala mostly because he has a +2 range side, so he easily pairs. You don't have to pay resources to get his damage out. So if he's following up, like, I really like the Trooper Veers Balatik list. That I think his name is his dudeness. That's it. We got there.
Oh, his dudeness. Yeah.
He and I were both trying different versions, and I think he built better. But there's a really sweet Trooper Veers Balatik deck that uses like just a lot of the good ranged aggro. You also get the advantage of drudge work. And when you get 2 dice with Balatik, he does have a focus side, and I'm growing more and more and more in love with focus as time goes on. It really just fixes everything. Like flipping a jetpack to +3, I'll take that like every single day of the week.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, so my yellow card of choice, and believe it or not, it happens to fall under Balatik and his gang, is Backup Muscle. From The Force Awakens, which I'll be watching later this evening with my wife. And this is a support card. It costs 1 resource, and it states, when you play this card, place 3 single damage tokens on it, and then as an action, you can exhaust Backup Muscle to move 1 damage token from it to an opponent's character of your choice.
Ignoring shields.
Yeah, so this is a really nasty kill spell because you're sitting on 3 damage and Mr. Qui-Gon Jinn of 3 shields but only has 1 health left is going to die. Or if you just need a way to get through someone's extremely defensive and tanky deck, Backup Muscle is not unique. So if you happen to have both of them in your hand and 2 resources, you can play them. And that's 2 unblockable damage per turn. That's a lot of damage. That's really nasty.
Go ahead, Jay. I know you want to talk about this one.
Fair. This is a card, if you're playing yellow villain, you almost absolutely have no reason not to add it unless you're not playing a damage deck. But if you're trying to deal damage, there's lists that I've seen that have been like, Vader Raider, every card is blue except Backup Muscle. It's it sneaks around, it finishes people off. The nice thing about it is like there's no rush to activate it, so the damage is there when you need it, and then when you're out of actions, you can just top it off or end your turn by doing it. If you're going for the battlefield, it slows you down, but it's definitely worth it. You know, you kill people with it, you put them on clocks. There's no way of mitigating it unless, I guess, you can like surgical strike it, I suppose, which actually is probably a reason to run that card. Overall, I mean, the card, like 3 damage for 1, unpreventable, like there's nothing much else you can say. It's kind of slow, which isn't a problem.
Yeah, I kind of want to shoot all that backup muscle with an ATS too.
Yeah.
I'm not as huge of a fan as it, and like Jay said, that the only reason you're running yellow and Beta Raider is for this card. But it's a little slow on my side, and I've been killed by it, or my characters have been killed by it multiple times, and I still don't really like it. But, I mean, I'm wrong, so everybody else likes it. So, you know, it's just, it's slow. It's the only downside about this card is that if you draw a late game, I mean, you're not going, you may not ever get the 3 points on it, but early game is great, but that's the only downside I have for it. It's just slow.
Okay. Let's move over to the hero side of things and talk about some of the yellow hero cards that we're excited to jump on. Jay, why don't you take us here?
So I've been messing around a lot with Akbar hired gun deck, and it's hard to ignore the heavy blaster. I mean, there's really nothing bad to say about it except it has 2 miss sides, but again, like playing more and more with focus, Akbar as a double focus side, you can easily twist your heavy blasters to their 3 natural range damage side, which is so devastating and potent. And a lot of times, you know, once I get the heavy blaster out in a jetpack and I can roll at least 1 focus off of Akbar, that's 6 damage. That doesn't cost me a resource or anything. Its ability to ambush in is great. Its ability to force your opponent to remove a die is great. It's just a beast. And like, if you run the right deck with the right amount of ways of manipulating your dice, I mean, like, it's even worth aiming, like paying. I'm back on the aim train, like paying 1 to flip that to the 3 side or flip the jetpack to the 3 side. That is worth 1 resource. I don't care who you are. Like, sure, you can walk into disruption, but I mean, there's smart ways to play around this stuff. You know, people underestimate what your dice can do if you've rolled poorly or they've spent it other ways. Like, there's ways of telling if you're walking into a trap or not. Yeah, it synergizes a lot with what heroes can do, and it packs just an absolutely stupid punch.
I've been playing this a lot in a deck that doesn't have a lot of focus sides on it, and this card alone makes me want to add focus to that deck, because I always seem to roll on that back half of the die with the 1 resource and the 2 blanks, and just feel bad every time I do it. Right? Like you said, with focus, this thing is, you know, incredibly good at putting out some damage with Han, with Rey, you know, with hired guns and what you're saying there. So just to touch a little bit on the words on the card, it's got ambush, which is always a plus, and forcing an opponent to choose and remove 1 of their dice. It's okay. It's not great. You kind of want to play your upgrades a little earlier, and if they roll a big, if you're waiting for them to roll with this, you're kind of missing out a little bit on the punch of the ambush. But if they roll a big wad of dice in the pool, they're just going to get rid of their worst play or their worst result too. So it's a good tacked on ability. I don't know if it's worth the extra 1 on it, but I guess with all the damage and the blanks, it kind of evens out there. So yeah.
I was running this card with Finn and Qui-Gon because I got lucky and pulled double 1 with the Force. And so 1 with the Force has 2 focus and 3 focus die faces. And that made this a nightmare card because it was just like, oh, 1 with the Force, heavy blaster pistol to 3. And then Finn, you know, would have something else to help add on to that. So it made Finn really, really punchy. And I liked it. But like you guys have said, without focus, it is a little tricky just because there technically is 50% damage, which is great. But there's also a third of the card is a blank. So it's, high risk, high reward. But that reward is really good. I like this card a lot. And I'm starting to get on that aim train too. I'm slotting one aim into my decks that run lots of guns and blasters and pistols and things, and it actually does pay out pretty well, especially considering, you know, the DL44 has a 3 damage and then a 3 for 1 damage. So essentially, you know, you're paying 1 for aim, you get the 3 damage. You're not really losing anything if you were to have to roll the 3 for 1 side, but it's nice. It's a nice card. It's a really great card to tack onto any yellow shooting character. Okay, so this card I had played against me many times during the pre-release, and my world is totally changed based on how well it was played against me, and that is Let the Wookiee Win. This card has been a topic of discussion for quite a while now, so if you don't know what it does, it is a yellow card, 1 resource event that states force an opponent to choose to either deal one of their exhausted characters 2 damage or choose and remove 2 of their dice. So FFG ruled that your opponent can choose one of those options if it doesn't affect them. So you have to play this at the right time where there is a exhausted character and 2 dice to be removed. But I've had people play it on me turn 1, and I'll just take the damage, and then they'll roll their dice. And, you know, especially like that friend of mine who was running Luke Padawan. I'm sorry, no, that doesn't work. He was running Luke and Finn, and he happened to roll 3 damage on Luke. So I took 5 damage that turn, like turn 1. I have 5 damage on one of my characters, and that's a lot of oomph. And especially late game, it's really rough because, you know, there was a game where I had Finn, and he had like 3 HP left. I rolled his dice, and he had, a blaster pistol, a lightsaber, his 2 dice, and I roll like the 3 damage for 1 resource on lightsaber, and the blaster pistol special, and then 2 blanks on Finn. And so he plays Let the Wookiee Win. I can't take the damage because I'll be in striking distance for Finn. So now I've got dice that I have to get rid of. And he was even smarter because that time I just took away the 2 blanks I didn't need. So the next game we played, he waited until I had 2 dice left, and then he hit me with that. So now I'm forced to make a really rough decision. So for 1 resource, if you play it well, this card really hurts. And I like it a lot more than initially when we first talked about it.
I always liked Wookiee, even in the beginning, even with the ruling that frustrates a lot of people. There's like 2 instances in a turn where it's not playable, like you go first or they've run out of dice. Like, there's so many times where they have a guy exhausted and there's at least 2 dice on the board. I mean, obviously it's harder if they're running like a 1-1-1 character deck. I mean, it's not universal, but I've always thought the card like did its job well. I think it's a pretty nasty thing to re-trigger off of Millennium Falcon. If you're running a deck that runs Millennium Falcon, I would honestly put in 1 Let the Wookiee Win personally and try to cast it, or just keep triggering it out of the discard.
Yeah, these cards are usually, you know, when you're giving your opponent a choice, that you're usually going to end up getting the one that you don't want, like the one that's best for your opponent. So the key to these is just putting your opponent in a no-win situations for these, right? Where, like you were saying, if you take 2, you're going to be within striking distance, or if you have your last 2 dice on the table. I played this a couple times, like as a one-of in a deck, especially when the card pool was much smaller. And I just never really found a good time to play it, so I'd end up getting discarded to reroll a lot. But yeah, if you can find or get your opponent in to win, this is good for you either way. It's a pretty decent card. All right, since we're sticking with heroes, I'd like to talk about Negotiate.
I saw that coming.
Yeah, it's a 1-cost event. Remove 1 of your character dice to force an opponent to choose and remove 2 of their dice. Yellow has especially Yellow Hero has a surprisingly high amount of dice removal. So there's been a couple times when I've been playing this card where, you know, I would shoot first with an ambush, then electroshock with an ambush off of Infamous, and then negotiate to get their last 2 dice out. I think that happened against you once, didn't it, Jay? Yeah. So removing like 4 dice in one turn, basically taking their good dice away and then negotiating to get the rest of their dice.
Yeah, I had Ray dead to rights, and then I didn't have dice anymore.
Yeah, and especially with Ray, because a lot of her dice, when I've been, of course, with Han on that a lot of her dice don't match well with the rest of what you're trying to do. With her discard sides and her plus, especially her plus melee that doesn't go off a lot unless you have Awakening out. But being able to, have a use for those roles is what I'm usually using Negotiate for.
And something to know, it does specifically state you have to remove one of your character dice, not one of your character or equipped dice to that character. So make sure if you're not totally sure how a card works, read it, because I had an opponent try and remove like a blank blaster pistol die. And I was like, wait, you can't do that. It has to be a character die. And it was like a 3 damage. And so he was kind of like, I don't know if I want to play this card now. So it does matter what cards say. It's not just, you get to lose a die and your opponent loses 2. It does matter that it's specifically a character.
The thing that stands out to me about this card compared to a lot of like answer and removal abilities in the game, it's similar to a He Doesn't Like You in that you have to have dice rolled already. So this card can be frustrating to have in your hand when your opponent starts the round and like rolls out, their biggest character with all their stuff, and then you still have to exhaust and get your dice into the pool before you can consider playing it. So do remember that Negotiate is a little slow. It's super good in Rayhan because you can drop a holdout blaster and then steal 2 actions and then flip your die out and negotiate them out. But even then you need 3 resources to do that unless you're overriding something. But do be aware. It's potent. It hits hard. You do have to like be established to get it going, and sometimes depending on who you're running, like your character die or some of your more important ones. So keep all this in mind when playing it. It's still a strong card.
Yeah, I really like it. I've seen it played a lot, mostly against me, and it hurts. It's just as bad as Wookiee, because losing 2 dice, I mean, especially early game when you only have 4 dice to roll, maybe 5 if you get an upgrade out, that's half your turn. It's rough. It's really rough losing 2 dice at any point in the game, but especially early or late when you're, sitting on a couple of dice you're trying to utilize to, push yourself closer to the win, and someone plays Negotiate, and you're like, uh-oh.
Right.
So let's move on to red. Rick, you are our red guy. So which card do you want to talk about, heroes or villains first?
How did I become the red guy? I don't think I've ever played red.
I thought you were the red dude.
No, I mean, I'll go first. Let's do villain, I guess. And do you want me to go for something that everybody likes or something that only somebody like me would like?
Do you, man?
Yeah, do you, bro?
Do me, just me. All right, man. I'm going to talk about Local Garrison.
Oh.
So, Local Garrison is a 3-cost red support for villains, where each opponent gains 1 fewer resource during each upkeep phase to a minimum of 1. People are saying how, Vader Raider is so good right now, right? Everybody loves that deck. It does a lot of damage, but it has a tremendous resource problem in that deck. And if you can get off a Local Garrison early against it, you will put it in a hole to where it can't do a lot of its 3-cost upgrades like lightsabers and Kylo's saber and things that it really needs to get going. Let alone the just being able to get anybody with 1 fewer resource a turn is going to hurt them. But people have been looking at Vader Raider and how it's, so good and undefeated. But this is one way to exploit that deck's weakness, if you can get it out. 3 cost is pretty hefty, but, Red Villain especially has a lot of ways of getting extra resources out there.
The thing about this card that I like the most actually isn't what the card does, but what it infers in a game state. And I talked with my wife and a lot of other like old Magic players about this. It's the card says each opponent gains 1 fewer resource during each upkeep phase to a minimum of 1. So it would hint that in future sets there are ways to gain resources past the 2 you gain in upkeep. So that excites me. But the fact that this also tacks the effect onto each opponent means if you play this card and you're playing in a free-for-all, the 3 opponents you're facing all suffer from this single card's effect. So it's really neat in how it interacts in a multiplayer environment, and it hints that, like we talked earlier in our past episodes about cards that have seeds. This is definitely a seed card, meaning that there will be resource ramp effects. And so that excites me that there's already a counter to that. And it's a really powerful effect. I mean, 3 resources to shut someone out 50% of their resource economy. That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah, do not play this card in multiplayer, because I'm just going to throw this out. This will cause every other person you're playing with to go at you with, not even feeling bad about it, right? So
I would play this card in multiplayer, and
you definitely would.
Yeah, don't listen to Rich. The Knights of Ren fully endorse local garrison and multiplayer games. Drudge work that out, guys.
Yeah, the Drudge work stock price way up.
So moving along, the villain card that I'll talk about in red, that I think is going to make its presence known more as we get further along into the competitive scene, is Probe. Probe is a 0-cost event. Look at 2 random cards in an opponent's hand and discard any of those that are events. As you are whittling each other down and playing cards and getting ready to, so to speak, do your tricks that fix your die or blow up or remove their stuff, I think I've had Probe played on me a great deal of times. And granted, it's better the smaller their hand is, but people play a lot of events, and if you can snake out that deflect, or you can get rid of that, use the force, like that can cripple a lot of what your opponent was planning to do, or stop a chain of events from happening. And the nice thing about Probe is it's free.
It's information.
Yeah, it's information too. You get to know, even if you hit stuff that they don't discard, you'll know what upgrades they have or what supports or whatever. So I think this is going to at least, I don't know. I can definitely see if you're running red villain and you're going to like a tournament, Probe is worth a slot if you know how to play it well.
Yeah, I'm pretty most of my games, half of my hand is usually events. I pretty much build half the deck as events to be able to mess with the die rolls on both sides of the table. So, I mean, this is more than likely going to hit at least 1 card, and playing against me. So if you're ever sitting across me at a table, play Probe.
Play Probe.
Play the Probe. And don't forget, discarding cards forces your opponent to draw more cards. So if they're trying to stall you out and sit on something, keep their hand full, it's essentially a worse version of discard if you can hit those events. So it gets rid of cards you don't want, and it forces them to come one step closer to drawing themselves out. So it has a lot of benefits with, there's really no, down points for it. So yeah, I like Probe a lot. Definitely a good card. My red villain card is probably not a surprise because I have talked about this, written an article about it, and absolutely love it. And that is The Best Defense. This is a 1 resource event that says deal one of your red characters 3 damage to remove up to 2 of an opponent's dice. And it's great. I actually played 2 of these once on a guy and just took away his entire turn, and it was phenomenal. This card is by far my favorite red villain card. It's so powerful. 3 damage is a very, very low cost to pay to get rid of any 2 dice. And generally, when you play it, you're going to take more than 3 damage anyways, so you get to mitigate where the damage goes. You get to get rid of 2 dice you don't want to deal with, and put a very strong curveball into your opponent's. I mean, their game plan is just, totally messed up because now they can't do what they wanted to do, and your guys are going to live a little bit longer.
Yeah, and this directly addresses the comment I was making about negotiate, where like you can play it turn one when your opponent rolls out and just like lands on like some 3 damage sides before you could normally respond. And in that perfect case, you can eat that die in something else and beat up your trooper. You can use it, when your trooper has like, or I mean, I've used this and hit, Grievous sometimes, like if he's super healthy and my trooper still has like some die to resolve. There are times where hitting a name character is just as good. Phasma eats damage real good with the best defense. But yeah, so always remember too, like, you choose where it goes, which is the other thing where you can hit healthier targets. So yeah, this card does a lot.
Yeah, I've always loved this card. I mean, you said you played 2 of these in a turn and kind of got rid of your opponent's turn per se, but they did do 6 damage to you. So
they did, but they rolled out like 7.
Okay.
But I actually didn't eat all the damage because I had Phasma and Trooper. So 3 went to a Trooper, 3 went to Phasma, and then I guardianed away the other 1. And so they were sitting on a bunch of like blanks or modified sides. And so the guy just took the battlefield. And I hadn't even rolled Phasma or Dooku yet. I just played 2 cards and used a Stormtrooper to guardian away another damage. And he essentially just quit. And he was like just so flabbergasted because I pulled off his specials, I pulled off the base damage so he couldn't trigger his modifieds, and it was great for the 3 damage, or for the 6 damage and 2 resources I used. He was totally flabbergasted, and that actually turned the game to help me win pretty significantly. And I basically had a free turn, and he didn't do hardly anything. So it was great. I love these cards.
The best defense, ... make your opponent quit.
All right, so let's move over into Red Heroes, the other side of the, I guess the tracks, you might say. Those Jedi. Whatever. Anyways.
All right, I guess I'll go first again. I'm going to talk about Launch Bay. It may not be the dig in the bottom of the barrel like we've done on some of the other ones, but I really like the design of this card. The X on this die is equal to the number of cards in your hand, with 2 range sides, a disrupt, a shield, and a discard. So it can really do anything that you want it to do, if you can get it out at 5 cost. But again, red is able to get a lot of the resource ramp on some of the other things that they have going on for them. So this works pretty well as one of your first die roll of the game, or one of your first die rolls of the turn, so that you can maximize the effectiveness of it. I mean, doing 5 damage is great, but discarding their entire hand is even better, so and this also works with Luke. So when you activate Luke, you draw a card, and now you can get up to 6 with Launch Bay, giving you a reason to draw cards with Luke.
I've had this played against me, and it hurts so bad. It's a bonkers card if it ever hits the table, because it's 5 resources? Yeah, so it's essentially, the cost of like a Millennium Falcon. So you're not going to see it often. I've actually seen it played 3 times in 3 games with 3, other players. And the only time it worked well was late game, because when people played it early game, they were also using their cards for effects or getting, discarded. And so it wasn't great. But at the late game, when you're kind of tapped out of all of your effects and whatnot, sitting on Launch Bay with 3 or 4 cards in hand, getting hit with a 4 discard, not fun. Really not fun.
Yeah, it's interesting as like both Rick and Sudi have been pointing out, like it kind of changes your action order. You typically, as the game goes on, you want to like, unless you're going to put an upgrade on them, round starts, you exhaust your bid guy and you throw 4 or 5 dice into the board, and then you start going. And again, if not, you're probably trying to upgrade that guy. So it's interesting that this support asks you, if you want to get the most out of it, to sort of like roll it out solitaire. It kind of asks to get mitigated pretty badly. So there are some subtleties in trying to play it and get maximum potential out of it. It can be really strong. It can be very devastating. Yeah, it's weird how it's sort of like the more cards you play, the weaker it gets. If you get hit by discard, it's not as strong. So it's kind of neat how, like, again, in order to like pack the most punch, you have to like change the fundamentals of how you usually do a turn.
I'd be interested to see what they determine the X's value is when you're not resolving it, if it's still equal to the cards in your hand, or, you know, for things like electroshock, if X is always equal to 0 on, you know, as far as, you know, the printed X or whatever. Not really sure where they're going to go with it, but it'd be interesting.
That's a good point.
See.
That's a good question. I mean, traditionally, using Magic the Gathering as a reference, X is always 0 unless specified.
Yeah, and other FFG games have done X is equal to 0. You know, Thrones does it. I know. I don't. Jade, is that the same in Conquest?
I'm trying to think of cards that interact with X. They don't.
They may not even have it.
They do. They just weren't as popularly used in the matchups and the warlords that were popular when I played, so I don't know.
Either way, it's still interesting to see where they go with it. I mean, Electrostock will still hit it if you have 2 cards in your hand, right? So, I mean,
I would think so. Yeah.
So we'll see.
So next up for me, then, this is a card that I think gets a lot of flack, and I still, to this moment, don't really understand why. And I want to talk about Black 1. I have been testing a fair amount with this card, you know, at face value. So if you don't know what Black 1 is, it is one of Red's legendaries, like Launch Bay. It's 4 cost. It's unique. You can only have 1 in play. It deals 2 range, 3 range, 1 disrupt, 2 shields, has a special and a miss side, and then the special is deal 1 damage to a character, then reroll this die instead of removing it from your pool. At face value, this kind of looks like a glorified TIE fighter. You basically move the 1 cost for the 3 damage to its activation cost, and it does a lot of the same things, but I actually just think this card just does a heck of a lot of work. I'm learning more and more, at least in the decks that I try to run on Hero. I used to have the idea that money and Hero just didn't go together, but using cards like Logistics and Datapad, there are ways of like adding sufficient ramp, and I'll say this, it's easier to get Black 1 into play than Launch Bay and Millennium Falcon. You know, that 1 resource, sometimes it's all that matters. 2 sides hit fairly hard. 1 side, you know, pings and then rolls it again. There's a lot of focus and ways of getting this to go where you want. I think Black 1 gets a lot of undeserved ire when I think it does just about everything you want it to.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure where the hate comes from. A couple things about this card I like is there's no modified sides. There's no pay sides, and all the numbers are really strong. You know, 2 and 3 range damage is no joke. 2 shields is great. And then the special, you know, you could keep rolling it until you stop rolling the special. I mean, there's all kinds of things that this card offers you. That's not bad. Like, I don't look at this and think it's bad. If it was a 3 cost, it would be insanely undercosted. So I think it's fairly priced. It does exactly what it needs to do. And it has plenty of flexibility and damage just built into the card. So I like it a lot.
Yeah, I think it's just that it's a legendary. It's like the least flashy legendary. I think, you know, people have just not really caught on to it, I guess. I mean, it's good. It's 4 costs, 1 cheaper than Millennium Falcon. Millennium Falcon does a little bit more. It has bigger numbers, I guess you could say, but it's not bad at all. It's just, I think it's just not the flashiest legendary.
Yeah, I mean, I get that it's sort of like an awkward middle child, and also as you start paying 4 and higher, you know, like Launch Bay and Falcon, they don't miss. You know, Black 1 can still miss. He's still human, but
it's the jacket.
We can't all have plot armor like the Millennium Falcon. So.
Ooh.
Now we're getting into it.
One thing that's interesting that's coming up with the release on the 1st is the rules reference is going to get updated by Lucas. FFG has been collecting a lot of questions, and supposedly a lot of the questions are going to be added that have come over time. And one of them has been kind of hotly debated recently. I don't want to get into it long ways, but Black One is one of the cards that's kind of hinging on one of the decisions, which is when you re-roll a die back into your pool, like say you do a special resolve and you resolve Black One special side, re-roll it, and it lands on special again within the same activation. Can you activate it again? I won't get into the ins and outs of why it could or could not be, but what I will find funny is if the rules favor that you can, I will laugh if people suddenly like bump Black One's sort of value up a tier or so when it's very statistically unlikely that you'll roll. If you roll special into special into special like a god, I mean, to me, you deserve all the miracle shots. You're obviously going to take down a Star Killer, but do remember that like the odds of that happening are astronomically small. So just, yeah, exactly. I don't know. I'm going to laugh at people like if that comes out in its favor and people are like, oh man, it's good now. It's like
Black One god tier OP.
Yeah, it can roll infinite.
If that does happen, then
Black One $70 card.
I'm gonna be collecting all the Black Ones and strings, and I'm just gonna do it.
Email Rick at knightsofrenpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, if you want to find your Black Ones, I'll have it.
Watch out for my Black One at Worlds. That's all I can say.
Super Black One. All right, well, since now it's my turn to talk about my favorite card that comes with a meme, it's a trap. This card, I was so happy they put it in the base set for just the fact that it's a trap, but it's actually a really good card. So it's a red event, costs 1 resource, has ambush, and it says choose a symbol showing on an opponent's die, any symbol on any opponent's die. Okay, then turn any number of your red dice to sides showing that symbol. And remember, with ambush, now that you've flipped your dice to whatever you want it to, you have an extra action, and generally you're going to resolve all those dice. A lot of people look at this and think, okay, flip it to damage, no big deal. However, when playing with Akbar and somebody rolls discard, you can flip Akbar to discard Orama. And oh man, this card is really flexible. The biggest problem and the most obvious weakness is it's 100% dependent on what did your opponent roll. If they roll specials or damage or things you want, that's great. If they roll blanks, not great. Or if they roll a bunch of modified sides or, things you don't need, this card does suffer a bit. But more than not, I would say, maybe 70-30, it is usable. And most of the time, it's really beneficial to get your dice to whatever you want. And then on top of that, you have the extra action to resolve them should you choose.
I am actually going to oppose you, CD, on this card.
No. It's a trap.
Yeah, I think it is a trap. I have tried to drink the red Kool-Aid that is this card, and I tried to make, I'm not even kidding, 5 decks. I tried to make, Akbar Finn, every red, damage die you can think of, all the guns, TIE fighters, Black One, just I am going to range, decimate someone off of the table. And the problem that you typically run into this card is it's so hard to get the red die that you want on the board in enough numbers before your opponent resolves or does whatever they want with the card, that unless you are also running hit and runs, which are good, but again, it's another hard to run card. If your red guy dies early on, it becomes dead. I've there are times where it steals games and it's super good. I challenge you on the discard side roll, since there's not a lot of red discard sides, but you can make infinite money with It's a Trap, which is one of the better and like slower payoffs that you can get for it, which then flip into launch bays and other crazy stuff. But I find it really hard to like get your dice out fast enough to get that like juicy hit before things start changing or flipping around. Personally, I don't think it's a bad card, and I think is like more ways to, you know, quickly get into the turn, or if there's ways of manipulating your opponent's die, you know, you could intentionally like flip their die to a range side and then do it. Like, there's ways of doing it. I just don't think it's as easy to set up as it appears, and I've had more trouble than I'd like sort of making it the card that caused me to win as opposed to just playing normally.
Yeah, I have a tendency of leaving my range damage or my damage die results out there for a long time, and if this becomes a heavily played card, which I doubt it will because it is a trap, but it's a fun card. But if you do, then you can't leave your results laying out there if you think your opponent might play this, right? I mean, it's the coolest thing about it is the ambush, that they roll, you know, a large amount of red damage on like a stormtrooper or something, and then It's a Trap, change all your dice to red and blow the stormtrooper away, and then he doesn't get to shoot. So, I mean, that's the best part about the card. But again, it's so hard for you to actually get it off in a way that you're building your deck in order to do it, right? Like Jay said, he wants to play all these red things and a red die that make money, and play all the ATSTs and TIE fighters and Millennium Falcons and all this stuff just to be able to play it, and then never ends up being able to do it, right? I think the best thing about it is range damage, because red dice have a lot of range sides on them.
Yeah, the coolest play I was able to do with it once, the only time I would count it as a success, was I was able to use it to get a bunch of money for pay sides on like my hired guns, which is kind of like blowing them up for damage, but at the same time, like, I don't know. I think it's harder to do than it seems, but I do think it's a card to watch, and as ways become more reliable for it, it'll get nasty. Just, you know, if you try to make a deck around it, like, really try and see how successful you are with it, because in my experience, I just ended up replacing it with a more reliable card.
I actually would probably maybe run it as a one of, like I'd splash it in. I wouldn't rely on this card to do much of anything. It's just nice if the stars align and you see what you need and you have a bunch of red dice on your battlefield, it's great. But I with the current card pool, I wouldn't like try and make this like your, you know, bomb spell for sure.
Yeah, and I think you want it in mono red, and hero is kind of pulled in a lot of different directions for red. But I guess if you had 2 launch bays on a table and you could get 4 red damage or 4 range damage on each one of those for the cost of 1, that's pretty good.
I've looked at running Leia and then 2 Rebel Troopers with Guardian.
Oh yeah, Leia and Rebel Troopers. Yeah, I can see that.
I thought about, like, I've considered mono red hero to be pretty fierce with the right cards. I think it can be extremely nasty. But I don't, like I said, I like this card a lot, but just because, you know, it's a trap, that's my thing. I like Akbar and traps and whatnot, but it has potential. It definitely has potential.
Yeah, it's not a bad card. It's just, I don't think it's there yet.
Super situational.
All right, so we have blue left.
Yes!
This episode's going a little long, but we're going to keep on trucking. So I'll start us off in blue villain. I have been... Wait, shoot. I don't think I'm about to talk about a villain card. I was going to talk about Power of the Force, which I'm certain is a neutral card.
What are you, some kind of rebel spy?
Yeah, that's neutral. All right, well, I guess I'll just jump to No Mercy, which is kind of an obvious one. But I have been trying to make something out of Vader and Kylo, which seems like kind of a weird duo. You know, everyone loves the Vader Raider train. Some people even like Double Vader Night Sister, which is also cool.
It's good.
Yeah, that's Rick's version. But I was like, you know, what if I only had one Vader? Is there a deck that I can make that does cool stuff and, you know, is may not be, toppest of tiers, but, does fun things. And so I made a 1 Vader, 2 Kylo deck, and a lot of what it focuses on is due to its mono blue nature. First off, every single card in my version is pure blue. I don't run any neutrals. And I've been trying Emperor's Favor, pay 1, increase your hand size by 1. It is unique, so you can't get up to a 7-card hand, but you can definitely get a 6-card hand. And when you tie that in with No Mercy, you can even turn like Kylo's like piddly little 1 melee damage into a really juicy 5 and just like pop a guy off the table. And then real quick, since I already brought up Power of the Force and what I was trying to do, Power of the Force I think is a very, very awesome and fun card. What it does is pay 1, change the value of a die that you resolve to the number of blue upgrades you control. If you're really abusing holocrons and like cheap upgrades like in the shadows, you can, again, like I like turning Kylo's little die into like a heavy hitter, and you can turn his hits easily into 5, 6s if you do a lot of proper overriding and focus heavily on swapping in a bunch of blue ability cards. And the fun thing is it turns your holocrons into damage, and you're not even necessarily trying to get mind probes out. You're just trying to use the power of the Force to punch a guy off the table. So I guess just like villain blue synergy is what I'm talking about at this point with Holocron and Emperor's Favor and No Mercy. There's a lot of ways to suddenly deal 4, 5, 6 damage and just like wipe them out. It's really fun.
And another combo piece, because I'm also trying to work on a mono blue No Mercy deck, is Boundless Ambition, which says you just draw up to your hand size. So if you've been playing and you've loaded out your hand with Holocron or some other stuff, and your opponent takes the battlefield, okay, and you're sitting on a No Mercy, you can play Boundless Ambition, refill your hand, and then play the No Mercy to pitch all your cards to just lay massive damage on somebody. And it's brutal. I like this mono blue villain combo stuff.
Yeah, it's a little slower than what Vader Raiders got going on. Again, I've been really bad about not explaining cards, but again, No Mercy is pay 2, resolve a damage side, and then discard any number of cards, add damage equal to number of blue cards you discarded. So again, with Emperor's Favor or tagging it on a 1 or 2 or one of Vader's 3 damage sides, like you can eat through shields and pop off a guy fairly reliably. So this is more of like a mid-range combo deck in a sense. It's pretty fun to play. You got to play a bit defensively early on because the moment you lose a character, Power of the Force loses a lot of its oomph. But it can be a very fun deck. Again, not saying like it's going to rule the tables, but if you're sitting on 1 Vader and you want to make something fun to play, I recommend doing Mono Vader, double Kylo. You have 24 health. That is not anything to sneeze at.
And if Kylo becomes a good guy, you can call it Vader Trader. But that's probably not going to end. Never mind.
Yeah, whatever. I guess I'll go next. I like Feel Your Anger. It's a 1-cost villain event that count the number of blanks showing on an opponent's dice and remove that many of their dice. It's a really kind of rub-in card when your opponent rolls a couple blanks and a couple of good stuff, and you just remove their good stuff and leave them with blanks. But what I like most about it, that it also fuels into a discard strategy, right? You're going to put them into a situation where they have to re-roll their cards, so you can almost think of it as getting rid of dice and discarding a card from them almost every time, unless it's at the end of the turn or they don't have any cards in their hand anyway. You get what I'm saying there?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I never thought about it that way. The most common question we see about this in forums or Facebook is it says count number of blanks and then remove that many of their dice. Most people seem to think you have to remove the blank sides that are showing, which of course would make this card totally useless. So once you realize you can remove any dice, then it's like light bulb goes off. Oh wow, this card's really good. But you're right, if you leave them with blanks, they have to pitch a card, sometimes even two, just to get something decent on the board. And that's almost a guaranteed free action for you that you don't have to worry about.
An interaction I really love with this card is it synergizes with Immobilize. Often, again, when it's late in the game and you're both just trying to throw all your dice on the table, I love rolling out my Immobilized character. Then they roll their dice, get a mediocre roll with maybe like one or two misses. Then sometimes you can get the read and your opponent's going to be like, all right, I'll roll out my other character, see what I get there. And then if it's all crap, I'll just re-roll. Like you can kind of like get in their head, so to speak. So when they do that, you can prematurely flip one of their dice down to a miss, and then when they roll out their next guy, you can hit 3 or 4 dice now afterwards, which can be pretty gross. Do pay close attention to what dice are the misses. I will argue that sometimes the miss sides are still more dangerous than the stuff that's face up, so always hit their like whatever the dice you're actually afraid of. It's not always beneficial to just hit the face-up die, because if they re-roll their really good miss die and they just get back to the face that they wanted in the first place, you might not have really accomplished much. So do remember, like, always target the die that you're most afraid of, and sometimes that's a miss side.
Yeah, and then I'd kind of prioritize focus on that point too. Don't leave them with a focus out there. You know what I mean? Because it'll just... it'll turn whatever the blank is to whatever they want at the time. Stuff like that.
Unless it's all they have left. Leaving them with just focus is hilarious.
Oh, yeah. Leave them with one focus will definitely cause them to feel their anger.
Well, and then my favorite blue villain card should not be a surprise. It was the first legendary I pulled at the pre-release, and it is Force Choke. Just Vader crushing your windpipe, making you hurt real bad. This is a legendary card. It's 2 resources. It's an upgrade ability for blue characters only. The die faces are 2 disrupt, 1 discard, 1 resource, a special, a blank, and the special effect is deal 1 unblockable damage to another character. Then you may turn one of its character or upgrade dice to any side. And I love what this does to the opponent. Super good. But we actually talked about this in one of our first episodes. The card actually allows you to deal damage to any character, just not the one that has the Force Choke equipped. So I've actually used this to ping one of my own characters and then changed one of their die to a much better face.
Yeah, I've hilariously in my Vader Kylo combo, Vader has often choked Kylo to swing his lightsaber better. It's like, no, use the +3 damage side, you nerd.
Yeah. So something I've noticed is a lot of people use this offensively against someone else's die faces. I've actually found myself using this about half and half against an opponent, but then on myself to, hey, I rolled a blank. Instead of pitching a card, I'll just ping my guy for 1 and, oh, hey, 3 damage. Okay, what you gonna do about it? And people are like, wait, let me read that card. And they're like, oh my gosh. So it's a really funky control deck card where you can use it to help you, to hurt them. It's great. It's so flexible. And 1 damage is not a big deal if you're going to turn your die to something that's going to help do something way worse.
Yeah, this brings up just one of my favorite game design elements of all, which is power from pain. And this and using it that way on your own stuff. And also, I've seen a lot of discussion on people being confused, like, why is Enrage a good card? But you have to remember, a lot of the effects that you get from these are almost immediate. Oftentimes when you're Force Choking, there's a lot of special sides that you can combo together to flip around and get more use out of. So it's a very cool focus card. It's also damage. It pretty much does exactly what you need. And then in regards to Enrage, you're immediately getting the resource out compared to Drudge Work, where you have to play Drudge Work and then you have to exhaust Drudge Work and the other card. Or for Logistics, you have to have already rolled your dice and then reveal a resource sides. If you don't roll a resource side, the card does nothing. In Rage, you just immediately get money. It's faster than if you go first, it's faster than your opponent can roll Disrupt. So Enrage is like very immediate payoff. You have to be careful with the damage. I often like, enraging off shields, going second, and you just have to remember, like, it's almost like 2 actions in one generating that money.
Yeah, one thing you can't do with Force Choke is choke the character that it's attached to, so they can't choke themselves. So I'm not going to get into too much into that. So
it specifies another.
Yeah, it does.
Yes, it says to another character.
Oops, I may have cheated the other day.
Oh no, cheating!
Good to know. Yeah, Vader was choking himself. Another. Oh man, that's good. Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
So similar to something you were talking about with Black One, we need an official ruling in regards to resolving multiple die faces that may or may not have been around upon resolution. So something I've been trying, and if it works, that's great, is I'll force choke Kylo with a mind probe on him, and then I'll flip the mind probe to the special and then resolve the special. So I'm trading 1 damage, usually for 3 or 4, and someone can't stop me because it's, resolve the force choke special, flip mind probe to a special, resolve that special. So it's a really great combo piece if the ruling allows you to do something like that. If not, still really good for dice manipulation for a very, very low cost.
Yeah, and again with both Force Choke and and Enrage, you can always go for the swag death if you're sitting at 1 and you don't want to give them the satisfaction that they killed you. I did that with Force Choke. It was funny. I was like, I'm going to lose this game. All right, Tyler, you're out. Like, what? Oh.
I'm 2 and 3. How did you lose? Well, I killed myself 3 of those times. Like, I force choked Kylo to death, and then Vader got enraged. So if no opponent beat me, how does that seed work out?
All right, so looks like we got blue hero left.
No, we don't talk about those cards. No, I'm just kidding. There's some really good blue hero cards. This is a tough one for me.
So there's a card that I've been looking at more, which is Willpower. Pay 1, move 1 damage from one of your exhausted characters to another character. This ignores shields. I think this card is neat because it's a heal and a damage, and it snakes around shields. It's out of hand damage. Doesn't matter what you've rolled, so you can do some little punishing things with it. I think the card's neat. I'm still not 100% sure it should always go in whatever you're trying to roll. I do. At first I thought it was funny. I was like, why does a character have to be exhausted? But it means you can't, your opponent can't roll out a guy with 1 health and then you can just snicker, pay 1 and kill their guy. You have to have a character activated, which I think is kind of fair. There's not really a lot you can say about it, but I think Willpower is neat. It's in some cases a 3-in-1.
Yeah, I think the 1 cost makes it less enticing. If it was 0, I think you would run it no matter what. It's just a free heal and a damage, a two damage swing. But at 1 cost, it kind of, I don't know. I don't know if I would run it. I'd have to test with it a little bit to see how much work it actually does for that 1 resource. You know what I mean?
I've had this card kill me before, and it's really frustrating. The biggest reason this card is good, in my opinion, is because of the ignore shields. So multiple games I've had, a Qui-Gon or a Finn sitting on 3 shields, 1 or 2 health left. And it's like, all right, my guy is safe. They're going to have to deal 4 damage to get to me. Even if they roll it, I've got cards in my hand I can use to eat some of their dice. So it's never going to happen. And then they play Willpower and you're like, oh crap. All those shields mean nothing. And for 1 resource, that's good. That's real good.
You go next, Sugi.
Okay. This is my favorite blue card right now. I'm not convinced it's the best blue card ever, but I really like it when it goes off, and that is Force Protection. This is a 3-cost upgrade ability for blue characters only. It's got 1 disrupt, 1 discard, 1 resource, a special, and a blank. And the special effect says, give 3 shields to your characters, distribute it as you wish. So, of course, the only hero deck I've been testing thoroughly at this point is Qui-Gon Jinn with someone else. Traditionally, right now, it's Finn. But this is such a fun card because you can just replenish shields however you want. And it's really nice because if somebody, like if Finn is empty on shields, you can fill him up. If you want to deal some plink damage, you throw a couple shields on Qui-Gon and you use his effect to eat a shield, deal damage. If everyone's lit up on shields, great. You can just sit on that special, and then your opponent really doesn't want to deal damage to you because you're just going to put 3 shields right back on. So it does a lot of things really well, and I really think it's a well-designed card. The cost is right where it needs to be. It doesn't do any damage, but it's a great defensive option. I mean, what do you guys think?
Where I kind of find this weird is that Force Protection is a 3 cost, and its villain counterpart Immobilize is 2 cost. And everybody seems to love Immobilize for being able to get the shields, but this does so much more shields than anything else. But you don't see a lot of people talking about Force Protection, and I think it's because of that 3 cost. I mean, it's you will get more shields out of this than you will with Immobilize, but Immobilize also has another ability tacked onto it. And I just kind of wonder why Immobilize is so aggressively costed where Force Protection isn't. And there's such a big difference between 2 and 3 resources.
I think part of it has to do with the most fun thing, obviously, to do with Force Protection is fling your shields at them with Riposte. So it definitely feeds into that. And I've definitely seen decks that Force Protect Riposte and then Return of the Jedi Riposte.
Oh my gosh! No.
And just keep flinging those, blue discs at my face. So yeah, I can see how it's a little frustrating to get that 3 out. I think part of it personally has to do with the fact that it does have two special sides, so it's mildly reliable in a sense. And 3 shields add up pretty quick if your opponent isn't doing anything to chew through them very quickly. I personally find it fun to run blue yellow hero with Force Protection and Hunter Downs. Once you have so many shields, unless they're hitting you with like a critical massive melee damage, like you're shielded for days and days and days.
Yep.
And then you drop all those Ripostes and then you just laugh at them. And again, I actually argue cards like Force Protection and stuff legitimize willpower more because, again, you're healing and then you're just sitting behind a battery of shields, and unless you get intimidated or Kylo sabered or there's a decent number of effects like lightsabers that just like ignore shields, but you can kind of like heal up behind the scenes behind this again battery of protection. It can get pretty hard to kill that Qui-Gon.
And, backup muscle does the same thing. It gets through those shields.
It's true.
Yeah, I figured I'd wait till last because I knew neither one of y'all would talk about this one. But I'm going to talk about Anticipate.
Ooh. Well, we didn't anticipate that.
Ooh. Ba-dum-pum. It's a 2-cost event for heroes, blue. Force an opponent to choose and resolve any number of their dice in the order of their choice. Then remove all of their dice they did not resolve. And this, when I first looked at this, I was like, this card is horrible. Cost 2, you're basically giving them an all-in to do whatever they want. And then I started thinking about the same thing as in Feel Your Anger, where if you catch them, roll a bunch of blanks and a couple of other things that are like, say they roll 5 dice total, 3 of which are blank and 2 of which are modified sides, you just got rid of their entire dice pool for 2. All right, now it's heavily costed for what it does and is as situational as it may be, but I mean, if you have no way of dealing with the results anyway and you're not going to lose by them doing it, forcing them to use all of their dice in one action and then being able to have their the rest of the turn to do what you want to do is not bad at all. But again, 2 costs kind of limits it, I think.
One thing that's kind of neat about it is it's a really good way of getting rid of disrupt sides when they're not threatening to you. Then you force them to use them when you don't have the money to blow up. Then you're free to do what you want for the rest of your turn. Granted, you had to pay 2 resources to play it, which is kind of disrupting yourself, but that is a side that becomes less threatening by playing Anticipate. I think it's a cool card. 2 is so freaking much for heroes, but I think honestly I'm going to start slotting it in as a one of on my blue hero lists, because there are times where you can just let them peter out their turn, they don't get to do anything else, and then you can just have your way with them, so to speak.
So based on all these notes I took, I'm going to try and utilize this in my hero deck, because I didn't even see this one coming, to be really honest, but it has an interesting effect. So I'm eager to get it onto the field and see what kind of things it does to my opponent.
Yeah, it's something you're going to want to test, and people, I mean, again, they won't anticipate it, you know what I mean? But it's the 2 cost. I just don't know if it's viable, you know what I mean? But the effect itself is a very high reward type of effect that could be something there to it.
Okay.
So real quick, we're going to wrap this up in a minute, but there is technically one other color, which is neutral. We don't have time to, heavily break down a whole bunch of neutral cards real quick, but I was just going to rattle off a couple to keep in mind for your deck building that have kind of stood out for us in a lot of our testing. But definitely check out Black Market is really actually kind of fun, especially if you're running a General Veers deck. If you're running range damage in yellow, there's barely any excuse not to run Jetpack. Jetpack just does a million things. It's disgusting with focus. It's really good with aim.
Cough, cough.
Cough, cough. I've grown to really appreciate the what people have nicknamed the sniper rifle, the 3-cost red. Its special side is it deals 2 unpreventable damage. It does 2 range damage without having to pay for it. It's got a juicy plus damage side. I definitely don't like hard casting that card, but in decks that run holdout blasters, I actually find that holdout blasters are kind of, in a way, fiddly, that their damage you're often paying for it, or they only add 1. I very much like overriding holdout blasters with the sniper rifle, and then using focus and aim and other effects to just combo some really serious ranged stuff. Is there just do 1 card a piece, guys, on cool neutral stuff that isn't hero or villain affiliated, if I left anything?
Oh gosh, I actually have 2 I want to go over. One is Datapad. This is a big favorite in my decks just because it's I'll just go over it right now. It's a 1 cost neutral upgrade equipment, 1 resource, plus 1 resource, plus 1 resource, special blank blank. And the special says turn 1 of your dice to a side not showing damage, melee, or ranged. It's great. It's cheap. It's effective. It makes buku bucks, and it helps ramp you into the stuff you need. My other favorite card that's neutral is Cunning. This card is super flexible because it does all of the things. So it costs you 2 resources. It's a yellow upgrade ability. It's got 1 focus, 1 disrupt, 1 discard, 1 resource, and the special and the blank. Special says resolve a special ability on another card in play as if it were your card. Hello! If your buddy is running something you don't want to deal with, you can play Cunning and copy it. If you've got stuff on your field you need to copy, you can copy your Datapad with Cunning. I wouldn't do that, but it's just great because if you're facing off against, say, a Crime Lord, copy that Crime Lord. If you see someone playing Force Choke, you can Force Choke yourself. Get dice you need. If you see someone playing a Mind Probe and you've got a lot of cards in your hand, you can Mind Probe them to the face. It's super duper good. And even if you don't roll the special effect, everything else on the die is useful. There's nothing, except the blank, of course. There's nothing bad that you're going to roll, especially that focus. Very, 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 very great card. Love Cunning.
Cunning is a very dirty counter to thermal detonators. I've had to play it against my detonators more times than I'd like to count, and it's frustrating because they can make it go off and you lose it. Not fun.
Yeah, harken back to that last game we played where I had a Cunning on the board with a special side, and you overwrote your Mind Probe to save Vader. That was pretty fun.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about Electroshock just because I love sliding Electroshock in whenever I can talk about it because it hits 90% of the dice. on the in the game. Spot a yellow card to remove a die showing a value of 2 or lower. Again, 90% of the dice have a value of 2 or lower. If you want to talk about electric shock while I look at my next card.
This card is my super duper MVP. If you're running a yellow deck, there's really no reason to not run 2. Just, it's so powerful. 1 resource to get rid of any die, 2 or less, and specials count as 0. Fantastic.
Here, Rick, I'll give you a handoff. Why don't you talk about leadership? That's a good neutral.
How did you know that was the card? That was
He anticipated it.
Yeah, leadership. Exhaust one of your red characters to ready another character. Pretty simple. 1 cost.
So good.
Red neutral event. Also illustrated by Cynthia Shepard, which is a local artist in the Northern Virginia area, if you did not know. Funny thing with this is you can use this with Luke to do an insane amount of damage and draw an insane amount of cards. And, you know, you can get up to 6. Yeah, 6 with Launch Bay again, even with playing the leadership. So you can do a crazy amount of damage with Luke with leadership, and Vader too, I guess, if you want to do that sort of thing, if you're evil that way. But yeah, leadership I think is a pretty good card.
Yeah, no, that's no joke.
I find it kind of fun in sort of I made a goofy 1 Phasma 2 Grievous deck, and they just leadership each other, and you either just murderate them with your Grievous, or if he's on his last legs, you know, you throw in some F11s on Phasma. She can hit, she can hurt, she has focus too, so it goes both ways, which is kind of neat. It's not the best deck, but it's fun.
It's a fun card.
I think leadership is going to stick around for a while, and I think we were all kind of like stunned that was the last card we learned about in the set, and it's suddenly like Luke like kind of became a little more relevant, and you know, everyone's trying to get like more Grievous more of the time, and yeah, there's a lot of neat little tricks you can do with this stuff. Even like throwing out Veers again. Veers has 3 damage sides you don't have to pay for. Sometimes Veers just like blows their face off. So definitely good stuff. Phasma Fears is another one.
It's a thing. All right. This is the last set of cards I'm going to throw on you before we wrap this up, but I want us to talk about one character we're really excited to play. It doesn't have to be a good, overpowered, just insane. I'll lead us off, but I am super excited to play with Padme Amidala, mostly because of her special effect that just says discard the top card of an opponent's deck, or spend 1 resource to discard the top 2 cards of an opponent's deck. She is built for mill, and that is my favorite way to beat someone, is to non-aggressively, slowly but surely break their psyche by removing all of their options until they just give up and quit. And hilariously, Padme Amidala, the Queen of Naboo, aka the Senator from Down Under, is here to take all of your options and throw them into the trash can.
Go ahead,
Go
Jay.
for it, Rick.
No, you go. You. Leadership, I exhaust, you go.
All right. So currently what I've got sort of loaded as my first deck. God, I want that errata so badly. But I really like Akbar. I love his 2 focus side. I love that he just makes all the money in the world. I like that he pressures your opponent into having to choose to discard less, because the more they discard, you could focus into his discard side, or you can threaten with Commando Raid, which unfortunately I really like that card to start, but I've sort of fallen out of favor with it for other stuff. But Akbar is one of those guys that subtly changes the rules of the game a little bit. Again, double focus is disgusting, and he just makes money. He solves a lot of the like how do heroes make money with logistics. So Akbar all the way.
And the reason I wanted to go last is because I figured I would steal yours, but I want to do General Veers, because I'm not a big fan of Villain Red. Not what Sugi would tell you, that I love Red for some reason. But his sides are all good, and he's very easily to slot into other decks with his point cost of 11 and 14. And his only downside, I think, is his health at 9. But he's not a huge target sitting across the table. People tend to just kind of overlook him until he starts doing a ridiculous amount of damage with them, especially when you can somehow get an ATST or a first order tie or something like that out there to where you can start manipulating those support dice too.
And then shout out to Hired Gun. Holy crap.
Oh, yes.
That card is good.
Yeah.
As a non-named character, Hired Gun does everything.
Night Sister, woot woot. So anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that is pretty much the end of the show. We've got a little bit of housekeeping. Jay, Rick, any last things we want to cover before we wrap this up?
Just look forward to your, release. Again, always remember, people are still trying to collect. People are still learning the game for the first time. So the best thing you can do is try to be an ambassador to new players, help them get started, be honest to people ask you, like, if they're nervous about trades, be the good guy, and you'll grow a community and have more people to play against is always a good thing.
FFG did announce that they are doing waves of further product releases on this. I guess the push is a little bit more than what they initially anticipated, but if your store runs out of product, it will be coming again in 2 more waves, I believe it is. But you can look that up on their Twitter, I believe.
All right. So as we wrap this up, a couple things we want to do regarding our giveaways. We are going to be wrapping up our second round of Gen Con promo giveaways. This upcoming Tuesday, we'll be pulling a winner. So if you haven't participated yet, all you have to do is go to our Twitter page, and we'll have all of these notes linked in the show notes. But go to our Twitter page, tweet us a picture of your Star Wars Destiny event. If you weren't able to make it out to an event, just send us a picture of anything Star Wars related and use the hashtag #KORDestiny, so that way we can find you. And then all we're going to do is pull someone's name out of a hat and ship you the Gen Con promos. This week is going to be the launch event for Destiny, so we are super excited. So a couple things we're going to be doing. Tuesday night of this week, Fantasy Flight sent me some packs, so we are going to crack the packs, talk about them, go over some card analysis with special guest Tiny Grimes from the Smuggler's Den, and we also want to bring in one of our community members from Discord. So if you haven't joined our Discord channel, go there, and then later this week we're going to randomly select someone from Discord to join me and Tiny Grimes to do color commentary on whatever's inside the packs. We have no idea, and we're really excited to take a peek. And then Thursday night, when we get our hands on the product, I'm going to be cracking my booster boxes live on YouTube, and we're going to get together, and I believe Rick is going to be joining me, and we're going to talk about card synergies, deck synergies, ideas, excitement, and just overall help promote this game to the community. And we have some other giveaways coming up this next week, so stay tuned, don't miss out. If you guys have any questions, if you want to send us any feedback, email us at knightsofrenpodcast@gmail.com. And thank you so much to everyone listening to the show. We have a brand new YouTube channel we just started earlier today, so we'll have the link to that in the show notes. And one last thing, if you're enjoying the show, please, oh please, send us your feedback on Facebook or iTunes. Give us a review. Let us know how we're doing. And thank you so much for listening to us for these last 10 episodes. It has been a blast, and we can finally say after the end of this week, we are there. We can start playing games, going to our game stores, and hanging out. So thank you everyone for joining us. It has been a great week, and may the Force be with you.